So Jan innocently walked in the sanctuary to ask a question and got put into the film clip. So I will tell you, I have, it's been years since I have been more excited about a sermon than I am about next week. So it would be a great opportunity to invite somebody to the church. If you know somebody that needs a church home, it will be a memorable Sunday, one way or the other. If it goes badly, it might make the newspapers. If it goes well, who knows what it might make? New Christians. I previewed it. It's already written. I previewed it with Marilyn last night, and she wants to borrow it for Three Rivers. So, okay, Matthew 26 through 28 is the scripture for this morning. You'll recognize it right away, I think. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many and for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. That is the time when what we understand the church to be began to coalesce, and Jesus was laying out a template that his followers and each new generation of followers has followed clear up until the modern day. So Alice Yoder is my mother-in-law, and she has been trying to move or getting ready to move in one way or another since I first met her 14 years ago. But it's more and more serious now. For instance, in the spare bedroom, you can see the spare bed. Right? So she is clearing things away slowly but surely. But really, she's clearing things away very slowly, I think, because she doesn't really want to go. She lives in a house that was the culmination of her and her husband's dream during their working years, and where she has had home and family and lots of love and gone through major transitions. So while the family is anxious to see her safer in a assisted living situation, Alice really doesn't seem all that interested in the move. She seems interested in getting the kids not to complain so much about her not moving. Does that make sense? So she toddles along and makes enough noise and stuff to make it look like something's going to happen. I am right now a lone voice crying in the wilderness, which is my lot in life a lot of times. And I am crying for, just leave her alone. Just stop it, right? Who says she has to move? She's 94. It's not going to help her a lot to move. Just let her stay if she wants to stay. So I picked Alice up at the airport in Fresno, which is where she was raised, for a little while, until she was 7. And it happened to be that we came the back way coming home, and we were within sight of the house that her family had rented when she was a little girl. Alice has been bent since I married Marilyn on helping me to improve various aspects of my life. It formed the basis of our relationship for many, many years. And indeed, when she isn't directly instructing me, I find a lot of her helpful hints to have improved me. So I was on that drive wondering what we might be smoothing out in my existence before we got back to Visalia, and I was also exceeding the speed limit. But she went to a different place. It was really a beautiful and kind of heart-tugging type thing. All of a sudden, my mother-in-law, a very nice lady who I cared about, but we had just a polite relationship. All of a sudden, my mother-in-law was telling me the story of her childhood, and it's a horrible story. So she said, "Steve, that's where my parents rented a house." And then she talked about she loved her father, right, as a little girl. He was the apple of her eye. And she remembered out loud that when she was about 7, her father came in to tuck her in, and he told her, "We are going to go to Africa, your mom and I, as missionaries to help the Africans." and you're going to go to a girls' school. And she threw her arms around his neck and cried and begged him not to go, not to send her, it was to North Carolina, and not to leave her. And her father, in that situation, told her that he needed her to quit crying so that he wouldn't feel badly. And because she loved him with all of her heart, she quit crying. And really, Alice Yoder's never cried again, not so much. Right? She learned to stuff it on that day. And they were telling the truth. They had a family, and I'm the lone voice in the family. And then they went off to Africa, and they dumped those kids at schools around the United States. And that's where Alice Yoder grew up. She grew up in a military environment. Her story about school is that she had one friend after about a year there, one little girl that she liked to sit with at mealtime and to play with when they had the opportunity. And once the school figured out that they were friends, they split them up, and the other little girl was sent away because you weren't really encouraged to be friends with each other. So we're driving to Visalia, and I am aware, right? Oh my God. We're in the middle of something really sacred and powerful, and as always in my life, my first thought was, how do I not screw this up, right? And the answer is, just listen, right? Listen carefully. Don't ask questions. Just let her talk it through, because it was just kind of pouring out of her, which is really unusual for her. She said that after several years, she was a young teenager when she got word that her parents were coming back from Africa and they were done being missionaries. And so she thought, huzzah, right? We'll move back to Fresno and we'll be a family just like we were before. But you might know already how that story goes. There's no way in the world that's going to happen. By then, her brother had developed a drinking problem, and her dad was so ill that he died a short while after they got back to the United States. And when they picked her up to drive her back to California, she had an appendicitis attack and almost died herself. And the family never really came together like it had once been. When her father asked her to quit crying because it would make him upset, her childhood ended, and no one could ever stitch it back together. So, again, many years in our relationship, and the only thing I know about Alice is that she has strong opinions about me. Really, who doesn't? And now I am hearing her heart's deepest woes, and I'm hearing her kind of stitch her life together and revisit ghosts from her past, right? And I am literally over in the driver's seat praying that I don't screw it up, and that she finishes whatever business she needs to finish. And she did. She talked almost the whole ride. In fact, she didn't kind of pull herself together. She even cried a little bit. Didn't really pull herself together until we were at the outskirts of Visalia. And then I know that she pulled herself together because she was getting ready to see Marilyn, right? And thank God, because if I walked into the house with Marilyn's mom crying, it would have been a lonely, right? Lonely day. On the good side, it'd be the last time they sent me to the airport to pick anybody up. On the bad side, hard to explain. But she pulled herself together, and she became the Alice that I had known before. So since that time, Alice will occasionally tease me. And every time I have an opportunity, especially when we visit, if I see something that might have belonged to her dad or a reminder of the missionary experience or those things, I will gently ask Alice about it so that she knows this. On that day when circumstantially I think she just accidentally opened up and she told me things that she probably was uncomfortable with afterwards because it expressed so much emotion, I want her to know going forward that that's a trust that I have with her, and that her story and her feelings and that raw truth, they're safe with me. That I would never, ever really embarrass her with it or do anything other than treasure it and seek to fill in some of the gaps. Does that make sense to you when I say that? It's important in our relationship that Alice knows that what she told me is safe and that it is secure and sacred to me. There's a trust engaged when someone pours their heart out to you that you need to keep in order to have a good relationship. It makes a difference for Alice and myself. The last email that she sent me, she did 3 things. One, she said what a delight it was to have us in Hawaii last time we went, and oftentimes, in truth, that has been missing from her communications. And the second thing she did, in case I got big-headed and started to wobble under a massive ego, was reminded me that I had not actually cut down the bush in the way that she wanted it, and now she couldn't find the clippers. It's Alice. And the third thing she did, which was very significant, was she signed it love. And it was to me. Not to me and Marilyn, just to me. Which means that somehow our relationship has come to a new place because of that sacredness of the conversation and the trust that was built when she found out that what she had explored in my presence was safe with me. It's really, really important in our relationships that we be astute enough to know when we have a treasure and to treat it like a treasure. When someone has confided in us what they might see as a weakness or a difficulty, or even if we've seen them on their very worst day, in their very worst hour, it is important for building our relationships that we be safekeepers of those things, that we not use someone else's revelation against them at some point, or hold it against them, or think that particular day is all that sums them up. In that case, I would think Alice was just an emotional basket case, barely able to contain herself, and nothing could be further from the truth. Alice is a beautiful woman with great sorrow inside that's lasted a lifetime, and she needed to let some of it out. Our relationships prosper, and they become strong and loving, and they do take on that essence of sacredness when we're smart enough to know, as someone tells or shows about themselves something that they otherwise wouldn't, that it's a sacred trust that we should keep. I know that you know this, right? This is not new territory, but I also know that we forget it. In a long-term relationship, in a marriage, or with a parent and child, or even with best friends over a long period of time, we can get so accustomed to going back and forth and arguing and living in kind of a contentious way that we begin to make it okay to use things that were at their origin sacred and trust, and use them against a person both externally as well as internally in the way that we think about them, until the result is that sometimes the sharing of something beautiful and very personal can turn into a poison that poisons the whole of the relationship. So this is the last of the relationship series, and perhaps the most important thing that can be said is that the relationship that we have with God should be a reflection of the relationship that we choose to have with others. If you are a practicing Christian, I hope that you have been raw in your conversation with God, that you have told the truth, right? I did this, or I thought this, or I have this in my heart, and it's not what you want, and I want to repent from it, and I want you to help me take it away. That's the kind of conversation, the kind of relationship we should be having with God, right? On Communion Sunday, it should be an opportunity for you to be very real with God. And most of us know intuitively you can. He knows already, right? But it's good for you to express what you've done that's against His will, or why you're on the outs with Him, to be honest about it so that it can be cleared and taken away. And our expectation is that God would never reveal that to someone else, that it's a sacred trust, right? That it is a part of the passion of Christ, and it gets forgiven, and then God Himself forgets it, lets it go, and sees us not as a result of our past actions, but sees us as a new life being formed. Well, that relationship that we carry with God is the kind of relationship that we're supposed to have with one another too, which means we have to practice listening well, recognizing sacredness, being safe for other people, and then internally letting go the things that have been. To be able to see those that we're closest to, not as only a product of the things that we found out about them along the way, but as human beings who have a new opportunity to be someone brand new going forward, to believe in them and to hold in trust the things that might be damaging. That's tremendously important. In your life, as in mine, I'm betting you can count on one hand the people who you feel safeguard your story. We don't tell our stories or be honest with one another very often because it's dangerous. And when someone gets a hold of things that you have shown your humanity through and spills it to other people or uses it against you, my God, that's horrible. It's as evil as it's possible to be. It feels like you've been attacked. So in our relationships, where we want them to be deep and sacred and fulfilling in the deepest human way, we cannot say to ourselves, the other person has to change and become like I want them to be, and that's the secret to success in a relationship. We must say to ourselves, first, I must be safe. Right? I have to be the one who sees the best in them. I have to be the one that can open up and share with them in a way that binds us and doesn't drive us apart. Again, not rocket science, but worth repeating and worth remembering that Christ treated people in the way that God wants us to treat people, and he was safe for them even though he knew all things about them. So, everybody got that? Say amen if you do. All right, great, super. I didn't expect it would be that serious. Sometimes, even in the best of relationships, you want somebody to change or you need somebody to change because if they don't stop doing that, it's going to be a problem. Can I get an amen for that? Apparently, this is the peaceful, loving side of the church. I belong over there. Even with someone as sweet and wondrous as Marilyn, and she is all of that, there are sometimes things where I think to myself, you're going to have to knock that off. And then I ask myself the fundamental question, who should tell her? I'm a professional speaker, so certainly I'm up for the task. Here's what I do, truthfully, in my marriage and in a handful of other relationships when that situation arises. When it just feels like you have to say, look, we got to talk about this, right? This has to change, or you got to do something different, or you got to stop doing that because it's going to drive you crazy. That's a really hard thing, right? It's a very difficult thing to tell another human being, you're not measuring up right now. So what you want to do is you want to put yourself in a position where it can be heard, right? Where the person who is being asked to change can actually hear it. Having been a public figure for a very, very long time, I could probably write a book, and who knows, maybe someday I will, on how not to get someone to change, right? Anonymous emails, they do not cause me to change. No. Angry shouting does not cause me to change. I will think about changing if someone who I know full well loves me and cares about me and has a bigger picture and more interest than just they want what they want. If they approach me and suggest that there might be something I could improve on, I am much more willing to listen to that and even to take action. Really, right? So if somebody comes and they want to beat me down and make me change to show me who's boss, what do you think is going to happen? Right, they're going to bring out the very worst in me. You know that because it's true for you too, right? They might own me, they might have power or leverage over me, and so I have to do what I have to do, but I don't like it, and as soon as I can quit doing it, I will. That's how human beings are. But if someone who you know because of experience with them has your best interest in mind, really loves and cares about you, and wants to do what they can for you, suggests that you might make a change, that's a radically different story. Here's how you create that dynamic. It's a piece of cake. It really is if you'll just do it. I call it the 10-to-1 rule. There are lots of ways to talk about it, but it goes like this. Pepper your everyday, ongoing conversations and interactions with the people that you love most with affirmation. Really. Every single day. An honest affirmation. And if you're bright, 2 or 3, you can come up with them. Every single day. An affirmation of that person. It can be as simple as sitting across the breakfast table and saying, you know what, my God, I was just thinking how blessed I am that you're in my life. That's it. Ta-da. It can be a compliment when they do something well that they do every week, right? Magic laundry. We talked about it last week. I made sure that Marilyn knew I appreciated the fact that the laundry did itself while I was gone. It can be, aren't you beautiful? And aren't I lucky to be going out to a dinner date or whatever with somebody as pretty as you? Every day of your relationship, to say something that is an affirmation of that person's worth and value, to celebrate when they win and to hold them close when they lose, gives you the opportunity when needed, right? If you kind of look back and ask yourself, what's the last 10 affirming and kind things that I've said to them? Come up with 10, then you'd be amazed how ready they are to listen if you have to say, I'd like to talk about maybe changing this. You'd also be amazed at the true miracle of what I'm talking about. If you employ this, here's what happens. On the way to 10, whatever it was that was bugging you when you thought, well, I got to build up to having the right to ask them to change, oftentimes disappears and you don't care about it, so it doesn't come up at all. That's true, right? You get so busy concentrating on what the person means to you, on how lucky you are, really, how privileged you are to be in a relationship with them and how much you love them, that it erases whatever little thing was niggling at you and you grow up a little bit and learn to live with it. That happens all the time. So that it's not 10 to 1, it becomes 20 to 1 or 30 to 1 very frequently, right? And you begin to count yourself lucky to be in the relationship instead of feeling the opposite, which is, aren't they lucky to have me, and by God, they better shape up, or right? You'll notice about the things that I'm talking about today that anybody can do it. Anybody can be safe with someone else's story. Anyone can look at someone that they are in relationship with and see good things and express those good things. Here's a little tidbit too. If you think to yourself, wow, I am really blessed by this person's friendship or by this person's grace in my life or whatever it is, but you don't say anything, it doesn't do them any good. And they learn you're a person who doesn't say nice things, you only say bad things. And then they learn they don't want to hear from you anymore. Nod if you're with me. So if you're sitting in a relationship that's really in a very bad place, but it's a primary relationship, right? And you want it to get better, I promise you, regardless of the circumstance, whether it's really on the outs and the thing is coming unglued, or whether it is moving that way and you want to find a way to save it and rescue it, whatever situation it's in that's less than perfect can be improved solely by you on your own, by deciding that you're going to express the gratitude that you have for that person and for what they bring to your life. Absolutely guaranteed. It never backfires. It never goes the other way. I've never spoken to a person who said, no, I show genuine appreciation for this person and for the qualities that they bring into the relationship, and they hate me. It doesn't happen, right? They refuse to see me anymore. It doesn't happen. What happens is they soften and they open up and the relationship grows stronger because it's a sacred trust again. And again, the beauty is you don't have to run off and see anybody to have this stuff happen. You don't have to buy a book even. Honestly, you can just trust me on this one. What you need to do is express your appreciation to the people around you in as many ways as you can. Make it genuine, not manipulative, and the relationship will blossom and flourish. I can tell you the people in this world who love me the most passionately. And I can do that because I know the people who I practice the 10 to 1 rule with. Okay. I don't really understand why you guys are so quiet. I thought this would make you happy. Honestly, we're not going to charge you any extra money. It's free. It works. The only thing that is required to be able to move into that kind of situation in your relationships, and this is why we have another series on it, is forgiveness, right? You got to let go of some junk in the past so that you can redefine them in your mind, and that means forgiveness of self, also seeking forgiveness. And the other thing is you simply have to trust that what God says is true and right, and what the world says is wrong. The world says might makes right? If you have leverage on somebody, you can force them to do what you want, and that's the way you should be in your relationship. And God says, no, that's not it at all. You should turn the other cheek. You should see new possibilities, and you should actually learn to see that they are a creation of God. Trust God and do what God has taught us, and they will get better. All of us here do these things when we're in the presence of a child. Think about it. No one meets a 5-year-old for the first time and says, oh no, we've got to talk about how you dressed. Right? Look, you got to develop some taste. You don't, right? When you first meet a 5-year-old, what do you do instinctively right away? You try to gain that child's trust by telling them that they're beautiful, or that you're delighted to see them, or they've grown a whole bunch since you last saw them. You give them compliments and praise that are genuine, and you're thrilled to do it because you just want them to like you because they're still innocent. So treat your significant others as if they're 5 years old. They will help by acting that way sometimes, right? Crave their love and go out and try, right, or at least their respect, and try to earn it by seeing the very best in them that you possibly can. I promise. It's amazing. It's disturbing about human beings, all of us, that it is so hard to convince ourselves to do something so simple. All right. Other stuff that you can do to improve your relationship is to build positive ritual. I chose the communion scripture this morning because communion, the older I get, the more important it is to me. In fact, I would say as I grow as a human being and as a follower of Christ, a bunch of stuff that used to seem super important to me in the world of the church fade, and communion becomes the centerpiece and the most important thing. If I had to choose, take all of the other stuff about Christianity away, but leave communion, that's the choice I would make. If you asked me to forego communion for the rest of my life, but I could hear all the great sermons in the world, I wouldn't sign up for it. Because communion is a really powerful thing, and it's powerful in these ways. It's a sacred connection with God, as I talked about, right? To utilize the opportunity to be real and to confess your sins and to feel the flow of forgiveness. It is over and over and over again, as you actually get better at it, is an amazing transformation in the church. But beyond that, it is a tremendously powerful thing to know when we break the bread together and do the institution of the sacraments. We are engaging in the same ritual, the same actions, the same attitudes that Jesus Christ and the 12 disciples engaged in, and every generation of Christians has since then. We stand for a moment in history as the link in the chain, right, between God and his people, and we faithfully carry on the tradition. To me, I don't really have words to describe it, but it's just tremendously important because it's humbling in a beautiful way and powerful and makes me understand no matter what people might say about our lives, we have done our part if we have kept the faith going and growing, and we have passed the possibility of the kingdom on to another generation. Ritual is tremendously important. We join every time we take communion with every other Christian in the world, whether they belong to a big cathedral, whether they're Coptic Christians, whether they're Catholic, wherever they are, house churches, wherever they are, all Christians do one thing. We take communion. We break the bread and we try to remember how much love God had for us, that he would give his son for us. And we confess our sins and we receive the cup as an agent of forgiveness. Rituals, really wonderful and powerful. Now, you're probably not going to engage in some kind of ritual like Holy Communion, but you engage in all kinds of rituals in your home, right? I hope you do. Let me just ask this. Who opens presents on Christmas Eve? Yeah, all the sacred people. No? We were watching The Crown on Netflix last night. Great show. I know nothing about English history, and The Crown helps me know I don't really want to. It's the story of Queen Elizabeth, and the rule is, I didn't know this actually, the rule is if you're the Queen of England and you sit down to eat, no one may take a bite until you do. And no one may take a drink until you do. I didn't know that, but the coolest thing ever, growing up on your birthday in our house, who knew you were queen for a day? Right? Because when you sat at birthday dinner, no one was allowed to so much as twitch or take a bite or a drink of anything until the birthday boy or birthday girl took a bite. That ritual is a beautiful thing. I would observe it now, but my lackadaisical friends do not. In your relationships, in your family, in your friendships even, you will build certain traditions that in and of themselves are much more important than they seem on the surface level, right? Whether it is Every Friday, you go out to the same restaurant or you go out to see a movie in a restaurant. Whether it is when the end of the week comes, you come home and clean the house together. Whether it is that when you're packing for a trip, one person packs all the toiletries, the other person packs all the clothes, whatever, right? There's a bazillion things, but it is important to recognize the things that you do when you're getting along, when it's good between you, and to ritualize them and to repeat them, and let the ritual itself leaven your relationship, because it will, right? In unseen and mostly unobserved ways, ritual is a very powerful formation and glue that holds relationships together. The other thing that is true is if you're in negative rituals where every time something happens, every Friday night there's going to be a fight at your house, or every time it's payday or whatever it might be, then you need to recognize those rituals for the destructive power they have and change them. Intentionally break them apart and refuse to engage in them. Ritual is a big deal, and you can look for it and bring it into your life. Who has ever had a tea party with a 6 or 7-year-old girl? Why is that important? Because somehow the female of the species, right, I don't want to be sexist, it just occurs to me to be true, really understand the ritual thing, right? It's an important thing to learn to be proper at a table, and it's important to have people you love sit at the table and learn to do those things. It makes them feel grown up, but it's the beginning of understanding the power of ritual, and ritual, when it's created and mastered in a relationship, drives the relationship and helps it along a great deal. All right. So I play guitar every morning. Lately I've been learning a Willie Nelson song called Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. So I knew it in my head, but that doesn't really translate to being able to play it on a guitar. So I went to the internet and I got the music and printed it up. It's really hard to learn a Willie Nelson song because the music tells you to start singing on the beat, right? On the first beat in the measure. But Willie himself, who made millions of dollars doing this, oftentimes doesn't start to sing then. He doesn't start to sing until a beat and a half or sometimes 2 beats late into the song. So when you're looking at music and you've got Willie in your head, right, it's a mystical experience. Marilyn has hazel eyes, and hazel eyes are crying in the living room as I screech and try to figure that out. So I play guitar every morning, and I like to try to learn new songs. The nice thing about it is I have a special room for it, so I really don't disturb anybody. The neighbor's dog passed away, so he's no longer upset about it. I don't know what it does for him, but it's a nice way to. It's my ritual to start the morning, right? And it is a tremendously important part of my life because that guitar, Paniolo, which is Hawaiian for cowboy, I like to name inanimate objects, I bought with Marilyn, which means Marilyn, who really is a good woman and should not suffer the ways that she does, went to the guitar store with me and watched me play probably 20 guitars. We spent almost 2 hours in the guitar store, right? And that's an enclosed room where when you play, it reverberates and stuff. And I don't really play. 2 hours. I have no idea if she actually cared or if she didn't, but she took notes on her phone about which, right, we compare them. I'd misplay that one, I'd misplay that one. We eliminated them. We got down to the final 5. We went and got the store employee. He came in and talked to us. And then we played them and 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 played them until we finally arrived at Paniolo. So that guitar, though destined to live a mistreated life, tremendously important to me. Every morning, without fail, I'm telling you the absolute truth, right? When I pick that thing up, I feel loved. I remember that she was willing on a Saturday to go to a music store and just sit there and suffer for 2 hours while I tried to find an instrument that had nice action and that we liked together. Do you hear what I'm saying? That's a big deal. Now, here's what my plan is with that guitar. We have 3 grandchildren, and the one that I like best, I don't know who that is yet. Right? Because they're not old enough to have done stuff with. But I'll figure it out. I'm teasing about that. One of them will receive that guitar from their GRC, from grandfather Reverend Creel. But they won't just receive a guitar from a will sometime and think, great, I wish I played it. along the way, when we visit them or they visit us, because the guitar travels with me most of the time, I'll play that guitar, I'll play songs for them, and when I do, I will tell them about the time that their grandparents went shopping for a guitar and how wonderful Grandma was, because I will want for the rest of their lives when they hold that guitar to know they're holding something more than a musical instrument. It's a part of their story, and a part of their story was they had grandparents who were flat out in love with each other. Do you hear what I'm saying? A ritual, a story, passed down, and the story is you come from stock that knows how to love one another and sacrifices and cares for one another. Not only is it for our relationships in real time, we have to be wise enough to know that the way we talk to children about who they are and where they came from and what their value is impacts them for the rest of their life. If your mother told you that she was thrilled when she found out she was pregnant with you and that the day you were born her life changed for the better, I promise you, you were not distracted during the telling of that story and you treasure it to this day. I promise that's true. Who could forget that the person who was godlike in their life for the first few years exclaims to them, "When I found out that you were a part of me, it changed my life, and it's always been so much better." Who could possibly forget that? And who would not benefit from the idea that the very spark of life that God gave you improved your mother's existence? That's a gift that parents can give to children. Even if you're not the parent of a child, you can let children know how important they are to you, how much you love them, and how well you think they're going to do in life. In our relationships, sometimes children get treated like children, which means we don't believe that the things that we say or do have much of an impact on them, but they do. I became a Christian when I was a child, right? A very young child. I tottered up the center aisle and accepted an invitation to make Christ my Lord. I am still bound by that promise. I'm always mindful of that. It counted to me. I don't care if I'm 54 now and I was a silly kid back then. When I made that promise, I was me, and it counts, and I'm still held to it, still following Christ, still trying to do the best I can to keep what I vowed on that day. That's true for all of us. When you're a child, if you are told that you're loved unreservedly, right, and that you have value and that God created you and wants beautiful things for you, you soak that stuff up. The rest of the world will have enough negative stuff to say, right? Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, the adult community in the church. In our relationship with children, it's our task to let them know truly the value that they have. Even while sometimes we have to correct them or do those kind of things, they need to know that their life makes ours inordinately better. You know that what I just said is true, don't you? Now apply it to your spouse, to your best friend, to other adults, and it's just as true. If you endeavor to let people know that your life is improved by their presence in it, that you care about them and that you benefit from them, and that their existence in your life is a thrill to you, here's the deal. Your relationships will get better in such a fast amount of time, it will blow your mind. All that's required is to have the ego structure to be able to care about somebody else more than your own self, not to count the cost, and to believe that what God said is true. When you love, the power of heaven itself is unleashed. So anyway, I have my own hands full on relationships. I need probably to go home today and write Alice an email and tell her, I don't remember what I did with the snippers. But before I do, I will tell her that it was a lot of fun to be out in a garden with a 94-year-old woman working in the Hawaiian sun, and that I'll treasure the memory forever. Amen.